Hi guys, it's Jen here at Checker Joy, and this time I am reviewing Do You Talk Funny? 7 Comedy Habits to Become a Better and Funnier Public Speaker by David Nihill. And first off, I won this book as part of a Goodreads giveaway, so FYI on that. This is not my typical book that I would review on here. It's not a novel. This is a nonfiction how-to book on becoming a better public speaker or communicating better. I'll read the blurby thing on the back so you guys get a better idea because it describes this book way better than I can. Public speaking can be terrifying. For David Nihill, the idea of standing up in front of an audience was scarier than cliff jumping into a thorny pit of spiders and mother-in-laws, without a parachute or advanced weaponry. Something had to change. And what doesn't sound like the best plan ever, David decided to overcome his fears by pretending to be a comedian called Irish Dave for 1 full year, crashing as many comedy clubs, festivals, and shows as possible. One part of the plan was at least logical. He was already Irish and already called Dave. In 1 year, David went from being deathly afraid of public speaking to hosting a business conference, regularly performing stand-up comedy, and winning storytelling competitions in front of packed houses. He did it by learning from some of the best public speakers in the world, stand-up comedians. And Do You Talk Funny? You will learn how the key principles of stand-up comedy can be applied to your speaking engagements and presentations to make you funnier, more interesting, and better looking, or at least 2 out of the 3. Whether you're preparing for a business presentation, giving a wedding toast, defending your thesis, raising money from investors, or simply want to take on something you're afraid of, this book will take you from sweaty to stage ready. So this book is actually funny, which I was a little bit worried about. Like, if this book is not funny, I will be severely disappointed. And it is. He does a good job of modeling what he's talking about also, and referring you to places where you can see further examples. So he refers to a lot of TED Talks that are funny, and he talks about like last for a minute, so these are ones that are high on that, or otherwise model what he's talking about in a specific chapter. And so this is a pretty quick read on one hand, like it's nothing too dense about it, but it's also a book that I feel like needs to be worked with, and so I did a lot of underlining and writing on it, which I feel kind of bad about because this is apparently an autographed copy of the book, which I didn't realize till after I had marked it up. Way to go, me. That just means it's well used. And of course, I didn't do my marking in pencil either. I'm a genius. Okay. But a lot of this is just basic things about communicating. So there are a lot of just basic principles that can be applied that are similar between stand-up comedy and business presentations. There are also things that I recognize from taking classes, reading books on, reading articles about, giving speeches, presentations, about like acting, writing, doing YouTube videos when I was doing research before I started doing them. Like, these are principles that I've seen multiple places, and they are applicable across the board. Like, it's just about communicating well and engaging the person who is listening. And the more you can engage that other person, the more they're going to remember, the more they're going to listen and be interested. Like, you don't want people spacing out. You don't want to give a 30-minute talk and have nobody remember what happened. Also, you probably don't want to give a 30-minute talk unless you have to. Like, you want to cut it down and be as short as possible. Like, attention spans are shrinking. We live in a world of Twitter and YouTube videos, and we want things as quickly as possible. So he gives a lot of advice on how to do those things and how to prune your jokes down. Like, you want a joke as short as possible too, so that you don't get lost in the words. You want the punchline to be like clear and definitive. And anytime that you can engage the audience, you want the audience to relate to you. You want the story you're telling to be as broad as possible so that everybody can see themselves in it, so they can picture what's happening. You don't want to give an obscure story that nobody can imagine and they just like zone out of it. He also talks about situations where humor might not be the best approach. If you're talking about, like, say, grief or something, humor could work, but also telling a personal story that other people can relate to might also apply, or mixing the two, telling a story that is humorous. Like, it doesn't just have to be jokes. You should test your stuff. You should record it so you can see what you're doing and how your presentation looks. But also, like, test it in front of other people whenever possible. You want somebody else's reaction, somebody who maybe doesn't have your expertise. Like, you want it to be accessible, and also to see if it's entertaining and if it actually is funny. And even if you don't know what is funny, you can still tell a funny joke if you know what other people, like, if you study it to know what other people think is funny. He also talks about, like, calling the room, which is when you are looking at the exterior stuff, kind of like improv, where you're noticing things like, oh man, this room is cold, like, I wish I brought my sweater or something, or making a joke about toilet paper running out. Like, stuff is going to happen and you should be prepared, and can use that as humor and to engage the audience as something relatable, especially if it's happening at that moment. You can also use, like, pop culture references or current events or local interests. So, like, if you're in Cleveland and you're talking about the Browns and stuff, that could be a joke. And he uses examples from a lot of different people, from, like, a speech JFK gave to a lot of, like, what Jerry Seinfeld and Steve Martin do as comedians and how they're constantly improving, and advice that those well-known comedians have given on, being a comedian and practicing, and how we should always constantly be learning from what we've previously done. This book also has this thing called a typography at the back, which he came up with, which is just a list of the main points in here and how to use them for, like, you can quickly refer back to these, which I love. There's lots of resources in here. He has, like, a website set up for more examples and more working through it. I really enjoyed this. Like, I enjoyed reading this book, and there are definitely a lot of tips that I need to work on in here. So it's really awesome. And I really loved it, especially as, like, a speech writing book. Like, this is really good. It's really spot on. And it's definitely a nice, refreshing approach to it. Like, it's more interesting than, like, even using comedy in this book is a way of making it stand out from other books on the subject. And I love the interesting take on it. This book is amazing. Go read it, especially if you have any interest in public speaking or communicating with other human beings. Yes. I lost my train of thought. Anyway, peace out. I love you guys and keep reading. Bye.